Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to another episode of Manifesting Muslimah. I'm your host, Sarah Pedersen, and in today's episode, I'm going to share some reflections from my trip to Umrah. So some of you may be aware that I literally have just come back from my Umrah. This is the first time I've gone on Umrah. Hopefully, inshallah, this won't be the last time that I'll go either. I'm really hoping that I get that invitation back to Umrah again from Allah to visit this holy place. But this was the first time I've gone. It was also during my birthday. So it was a wonderful birthday celebration, so to speak. I mean, I didn't really celebrate, but it was the way that like the day of my, my birthday, I was actually praying Tahajjud and Fajr in Medina. And then I ended up in the evening performing my actual Umrah. So it was just such an incredible birthday to have so many reflections from the trip that I want to try and sum up some of them and share with you in today's episode. Some of these things I feel like people I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this. So I want to try and sort of like get to some of those things as well. And some of the things you might have heard before. But I just think it's important that we share some of these reflections from trips like Umrah, because I do believe that a lot of us, for obvious reasons, put a lot of emphasis on, but sometimes maybe not for the right reasons. And so it's important to understand like our own expectations versus what the reality of it actually is. And so I'm hoping that this can help you sort of set some good intentions if you are planning to go on Umrah, or if you are going on Umrah very soon, or like just in general for when you will be invited, which you will inshallah be in your lifetime, or Hajj for that matter. But I haven't done Hajj, so this is specifically for Umrah. Okay, so the first thing I really want to say is that this is still very recent. I'm still processing. It was such a huge trip in a lot of ways. Religiously, spiritually, those two for sure. And I do believe that there's a lot of things that I'm still sort of trying to process and understand, and, just kind of come to terms with in my own time. So there'll probably be a lot of things that I haven't even like fully understood yet about the trip, but they might come later on, and if it's applicable for me to share it, then I will. But another thing is that it's also just the overwhelm of the places themselves. So I went with a small group of people. My dad hosts groups of people from Denmark to travel to Medina and Mecca with him and then perform the Umrah. And so it was in a group of people. We were like, I think it was 16 or 17. Well, no, and then there were some British people who jumped on with our group. So I think we were like 24 people in total, maybe 25. And so we were a small group of people who did this together, so to speak. But, in the group, we didn't spend every day together. We traveled together, we did the actual Umrah together, and there were some field trips type situations that we did together. But the rest of the time we kind of had on our own. And I had such a brilliant blessing that I was able to do it with both my mum and my dad, which is such a privilege that I'm able to do that. My mum and dad are both 70 years old. Actually, my dad is 71, 72. I can't remember. Either way, the point is just that, my mum and dad, I was able to go Umrah with both of them and perform Umrah with them for my very first time. So that also in and of itself feels kind of overwhelming, like from an emotional perspective, but also from that blessing that Allah has given me from that religious and spiritual perspective. So even in just that one thing, and I say just that one thing, it feels absolutely amazing and overwhelming in a lot of ways. And I think there's definitely some things even in that makes me feel even more humbled by Allah, but like in a good way, of course. Every humbling from Allah is in a good way, but in the sense of like, wow, Allah really, I don't know, because it's going to feel so weird when I say it, but I feel really special. Like I feel really loved by Allah, and we all should feel that way. But I think we often forget that. And so to get it in a manifestation like that really cemented something in me of like, Allah really sees something in you, Zahra. So, take yourself seriously. And I don't know why I'm getting like a little bit emotional just speaking about it. I think it's just because so far it's just been in my mind and I've just been thinking so much about it. And this is the first time I'm sort of like vocalizing it and speaking on it. But, and again, this is not to be like, I'm so special. Allah, this is just a blessing that Allah knew would be very significant to me. I know a lot of people who've gone with their parents, some have gone with their, Naseeb, some have gone with their sisters, some special friend, whatever, and it'll probably mean the same to them. So, the blessings from Allah and those special signs and ways of showing us that He loves us, Allah loves us, will be, unique to each and every single one of us. But this one really just was very significant to me. And understanding the privilege in that, because not everybody gets to travel with both their mum and dad, and to go for prayer, for worship, And so that in and of itself was just such a humongous, overwhelming, significant moment for me, and one that I'm still processing in a lot of ways still. But yeah, so it's just a lot of overwhelming emotions are coming up when, I'm sitting down and reflecting on it. But one thing that I really want to sort of emphasize, and one thing that I want you to take away specifically from this video, is I have actually been invited to go Umrah for many years now. As I said, my dad hosts these trips and he goes maybe like 4 times a year, maybe 5 times a year on Umrah and Hajj. He does the Hajj once a year, but then, he goes, I think at this point it's pretty much like every other month he travels on Umrah. So he goes several times a year, and he has done that for a few years now, and he's invited me to go with him for a few years now. And every time I've said no. And that might sound really weird because this is an all expenses paid trip. So like my dad, paid for my trip through this experience. So instead of him getting paid, he uses that pay to basically pay for me. And I've never wanted to go. I've never wanted to go, and I've actually had several reasons for it. Number one, I've always felt like I want to be ready. Like I want to be spiritually ready to meet Allah in that way. And I want to be able to do it not just for the travel sake. Like it's not just like, oh, I've done that, let me check it off a bucket list kind of thing. It for me, it was like, and it always has been sort of like that spiritual and religious significance of going on Umrah and being able to fully absorb everything from that trip into to whatever extent I am able to, obviously in that moment. And up until literally now, I haven't felt ready for that. And it wasn't until October I was thinking about it, and in my membership, which if you haven't signed up, sign up for the membership, because let me tell you right now how incredible that membership is. I was thinking so much about Umrah, and we were sitting in a meeting in the membership, and I brought it up with the girls to say, listen, I've been getting these like invitations from my dad, and I don't know, lately I've really been thinking about it. Like it's not as daunting and scary as it has been for me in the past, the thought of going on Umrah, but I'm really hesitant about it and I'm really worried about it. And just there's a lot of emotions attached to Umrah. It's not just like, oh, let me go to Turkey on a holiday, like there's more to it, right? And the girls in the group, alhamdulillah, thank you if you're listening or watching and you were in that meeting. Thank you so much, because of the girls in the group and the support and the things that they said to me in that meeting, I was so overcome with emotions of like, yeah, it's the right time, that I actually ended up calling my dad that same evening, and we agreed that I was going to go in January. And that was in October. I had that conversation in the meeting and then agreed with my dad. And that, 2 things here. Number one, speaks volumes about having the right community around you, because they didn't make me feel guilty or shameful or anything around having said no to going on Umrah for years at this point. Up until now, they didn't push me. They were all very understanding, very supportive, and like, yeah, it's a big thing, and take your time. If it doesn't feel right, then don't do it. But obviously, we would support you going, and it's going to be wonderful. And they kind of like just spoke into the things, the highlighting, sort of like highlighting the blessings of going now rather than waiting. Where in the past, I feel like when I've spoken to people about Umrah or Hajj, there's been a lot of shame around it, like, oh, you have to go when you can, because it's a must as a Muslim and things. And I feel like the kind of pressure that doesn't necessarily help, and the kind of guilt that doesn't really help when you're trying to make a guide, like intuitively guided decision rather than a decision based on force. So that was really like lovely, and why you should definitely have a supportive community and understanding community around you. And the second thing is, that I said yes when I was ready. I felt it within myself. I felt like I was in a position now where, I've done a lot for myself spiritually and religiously, that it felt right to take that next step with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, go when you're ready. Go when you're ready. Don't feel forced or pushed or guilted or shamed into going just because the opportunity presents itself. Because one thing I will say, there were two guys in the group. They traveled with their mums, and both the guys were like in their 20s, and neither one of them wanted to be there while I was there. They were in the group. And I felt so sorry for them, because this was their first experience in both Medina and Mecca, and performing Umrah and seeing the Kaaba for the first time. And they looked so miserable and they weren't enjoying it. And it's not because they're not Muslim or anything, but it's the whole essence of go when you're ready, not because somebody forces you. Don't force another person to go just because you're ready. It's just such a holy and spiritual and deep religious practice that if you're forced into it, it can really ruin a lot of things for you. And I felt really sorry for them for that. I do hope that, in time they'll be able to look back and be like, oh, well, our mothers did it because, it meant something to them, and, there's a blessing in it and whatever. But it was really hard seeing them, because I was, and a lot of us were so ecstatic around being there and performing this Umrah. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel really sorry for them, because I felt like they were being forced into a very spiritual practice that they just weren't ready for. And yeah, I just don't agree with that kind of stuff. I don't agree with force in religion. And so I felt really sorry for them for missing out on that kind of ecstasy that the rest of us were getting or experiencing from being there because we wanted to. So that's just like a little reminder for you that, you have to go when you're ready and when you want to, because it's literally going to ruin it for you if you don't, because there are a lot of things when you're traveling there that can ruin the experience for you. And if you already start the whole thing off on a bad note, it's really hard to find the highlights, because the highlights truly are so deeply personal and spiritual that it's not, you're not going to find it necessarily in the place or in the people or anything. It's going to come from what you come with yourself. So that's the first thing that I want to say. I'm looking down here because my notes are here. The second thing is the privilege. I really had to recognize the privilege that I have. Number one, with the fact that I get to travel there and I'm not spending any money. My dad has to do that. And my dad even didn't have to spend the money. He just kind of had to forego the pay, so to speak, so that I could be there. And so there's a huge privilege in that. There's a huge privilege in being able to travel with my mum and my dad and to perform this Umrah. There was a huge privilege in being able to do it when I wanted to do it. I also understand that is a big privilege and not everybody will have that privilege. So, there's a lot of privilege involved also in being able to perform Umrah. And also when we're looking at it from a more general perspective, we were able to stay in really good hotels. Some people just use all their money literally just to get there, and then they'll sleep, outside or in the harams or whatever. And just recognizing your privilege as a Muslim, as a woman, as a Danish Moroccan, as, whatever it might be. There is so much privilege to be recognized when you're there. And I think one of the things for me is it really sets things in perspective around gratitude as well. Because yeah, let me finish my sentence before I interrupt myself, because then I kind of push myself out of it. But one of the main things, and this is one of the things that I've been saying a lot in my work, is, there's always reasons to be grateful, and really focus on the gratitude. And if the finances are shit and you're going through a divorce and your health is shit, being grateful for being Muslim, being grateful for praying, being grateful for opening up your Quran, being grateful for breathing, whatever it might be, right? And it's the littlest things. And when you go to a place like that and you see the worship and the amount of sacrifices that people probably have had to do to get there, and what they are doing to stay there, to be there in the first place, versus somebody like me who was staying at 5-star hotels and, eating well, and again, like being able to go shopping and whatever. It really sets things into perspective of gratitude and the privilege that really exists within even the Ummah, and how we need to be so aware of that, because when we're there, while of course it's like in the harams and stuff, of course, we can't tell who's rich, who's poor, whatever. Alhamdulillah for that, right? But once you go outside and you start seeing the people who are sleeping outside, and things like that, and begging for money, for food, whatever, it puts the things into perspective, and it really makes you recognize and understand that there's a privilege that exists there, that you have to recognize that. And if you don't recognize that, that is on you, and you will need to work on that. So that there was a lot of kind of recognizing my own privileges as a Muslim as well, even as somebody who, I don't live in a mansion, I live in a studio. This is my whole house and whatever, but even in that, do you know what I mean? So that was a big reflection that also came up for me, that I would also extend to you, to sort of like have a little ponder around that before you go, because I think a lot of people also have this idea of like, oh, I want to go and it has to look this way, and then once you're there, you recognize just the difference in socioeconomic statuses of the people that are there, and the situations, and it's a very unique experience in that way, and alhamdulillah for that, because let's hope that it keeps us humbled, inshallah. So the next thing that I want to say, to hopefully just like a little reflection, and maybe you can take some of it away for you as well if you're planning on going on Umrah or something. I wanted to do so much. When I went there, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be making so many TikToks. I'm going to be recording my podcast. I've got my dad there. He's going to record a podcast with me. We're going to record TikToks together. It's going to be so much fun. And I'm going to be like doing my meetings. And I'm just basically like, I'm going to read even more of my Quran. I'm going to do all of these things. You want to do so much. Like the intention is fine and it's good and whatever. But once you're there, time flies. And I'm not talking about like just like normal, like, oh, you're having a good time. This is the time there is, I mean, speaking very much of like pretty much like I think the last episode that I uploaded before I went about time and death, time there really shows itself as an illusion. Time is another thing there, because even at night, people are going to the mosques, of course, and praying and in worship. And there is no such thing as, oh, the things are closed now. There is no opening and closing hours. Everything is always open, and and it's not like, oh, some people might go to Tahajjud prayer or some people might go to Fajr. Everybody is there. Everybody's spending several hours in the masjid, in worship, in those positions of worship, and you will too. And you will too. I hope for you. I mean, because it's a wonderful place to do it. But I severely overestimated the amount of things that I would want to do once I was, or like could do in reality, because it was the same for me. I was like there and I was like, I want to spend a lot of the times, when I was in Medina, I wanted to spend all of my time in Masjid Nabawi. When I was in Mecca, unfortunately, literally right after performing my Umrah, I got COVID. And so I was in bed the rest of the time. And the last day we were there, I had enough energy to go out with my mum and dad and go back into the haram and pray and make du'as and stuff. But other than that, I was in the hotel room the whole rest of the time in Mecca. So there's, all of those things like, oh, you can get very sick. You want to sit and pray. You'll want to do all these things. You want to like really devote yourself to Allah. And prayer there is not like, I don't know, it's going to maybe trigger some people saying this. It's not like a, 2-minute thing and then you're done. Like the thing you check off a to-do list. Oh, I've got to pray Asr now. Okay, fine. I'm going to pray and then I'm going to go because I've got something coming up. You're in that prayer. Do you know what I mean? You're taking your time. You're in there. You're making sure you sit with the dua, the dhikr, you're, taking your time when you're reciting Ayat al-Kursi after your prayers, like you're there. And so, maybe if you're planning on doing a lot of things, just humble yourself a little bit and be like, the priority is definitely going to be there for Allah. Everything else is a bonus if you get a chance to go around doing anything else. But don't get too disappointed or shocked if you just don't have the time, because you will also be sleeping in the daytime because you come home late and then you sleep maybe like for 4 hours and then you wake up and you get ready to go pray tahajjud and then you go have breakfast and then you sleep a little bit in the afternoon and then you're sleeping kind of around all around the day because your sleep schedule is going to be so messed up. So even in the daytime, you're like, oh, I've got a couple of hours. You're going to be so tired that if you're not in the masjid praying, you're going to be back in the hotel having a nap. So just keep that in mind. And then on top of that, especially if you're somebody like me who's, self-diagnosed ADHD, but also a massive introvert, the amount of people, the sheer volume of people around you at any one moment of time is so exhausting and draining. It's very hard to be outside with people all the time. And so that as well is going to drain you. So there's a lot of elements that are going to feel very physically draining to you, mentally draining to you. And it's kind of funny because at the same time as you may be being physically and mentally drained, you're spiritually so awake. And I thought that was so interesting because I was like, wow, I'm so like my mind and my soul, like it wasn't even my mind. It was like my soul came to life. My soul was so alive. I've never been that alive in my soul. That connection with Allah and that awakenedness inside of me in my soul was the most it's ever been in my entire life. So you feel ready and you're like, wow, I'm here. And then it's like your body just can't keep up. Well, for me at least, I don't know about you, but that was definitely my experience. So I'm just going to check the time there. That was definitely my experience. And so it was definitely one of those like, it feels a little confusing because you want to do more and you're so excited and like in your spiritual self, you're so awake and ready, but you just can't keep up with it. But that also, and I'm still doing a lot of reflections on this. So if it's sort of like not quite finished, I apologize, but I just want to share where I'm going with this or like where my mind is going. I think is to really speaks into what our deen is like when it's fully like when it's there, when it's fully connected and how good it can feel. But because we're in dunya, we rarely get that experience because dunya, even in a place like that, will overtake in a lot of ways. That is the test of this dunya for a lot of us, So, but it's that sense of feeling like, wow, when you're really connected and spiritually there and religiously like on point, you come to life in a way that dunya will never be able to bring you to life. But still understanding that this is not heaven. Like you're still very much stuck in this earth right now. And so being able to sort of rein it in some ways while still giving it that space or finding the balance at the very least so that you're not exhausting yourself and sort of burning yourself out too quick. Again, this is like a half a thought because I'm still processing, especially that because it felt very, I don't even know if I have the correct words even to describe it, but subhanAllah, it was so invigorating. It was so incredible to feel that alive spiritually inside of yourself. And then really also recognizing the dunya limitations of that kind of spiritual awakening in a lot of ways. But again, that's like a half a thought. Inshallah, Allah will give me the space to delve further into that because I really think that was a very interesting thing that happened to me. And I think for a lot of people when they're there. In general, like I'm going to say there's a lot of things that happened and a lot of things that I experienced. I was gone for 10 days there, 5 days in Medina, 5 days in Mecca. And I haven't completed all of it. And some of it I might not even want to share with you guys just because it's very personal in my personal spiritual religious journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think like I'm certainly definitely going to respect that for myself. But I also want to sort of extend that to you, that if you're going, remember that it's a personal journey. Not everything is to be shared. I shared vlogs while I was there, video like on TikTok, if you're not following me there. And I was very deliberately like, when I'm like, and I've always been like this, but when I'm praying, I don't film it. Like I don't film when I pray. I didn't film when I was doing my Umrah. I didn't film when, like all of these very special, like this is for me and Allah, more for me because it's not really for Allah. Allah doesn't need anything from me, but you know, this is between me and Allah and for me and my spiritual and religious health and well-being. I was also like, the boundaries had to be set, you know, like not everybody's invited on that. This is between me and Allah. And so I choose not to record every single thing. I'll record the things when I'm out seeing places. I'll record when I'm out shopping, eating. I'll record when I'm walking into the harams and stuff. But I'm not going to record in the worship, in the act of worship, and those moments when it feels very much connected just between me and Allah. And I think it's very important for you also, especially for anybody who's going to go anytime now, because I do see a lot of videos online. And listen, I'm not trying to shame you, and you do what you want to do, of course, but of course clearly I have some thoughts about it or opinions about it. That doesn't mean that my opinion is right and yours is wrong. Please don't take that away from it, but it's just, you know, some thoughts that maybe you can take from it what you need to, or leave it if you don't. But I see a lot of people recording themselves while they're praying, or recording themselves, you know, in salah, recording themselves like as they're walking into the haram for the first time, seeing the Kaaba. I personally feel like these are very special private moments between you and Allah. Again, this is just my opinion. I'm just sharing it. I'm allowed to have my opinion just like you're allowed to have yours. So even if you're like, but I recorded mine and I didn't feel this way, that's okay. I'm really not coming for you. But this is just observations for anybody who might be going in the future. Just consider maybe keeping those things to yourself, because it is not for everyone. These are very special moments just between you and Allah. And, you know, when I was performing the Umrah, like we were doing the tawaf and then we had to go the Safa and Marwa, you know, the walking and stuff, I didn't pick up my phone once. And it was a very deliberate choice, because it's not like I'm so good, oh my God, listen to me, I never picked up my phone. Please don't take that away from this. It was more like I wanted to just as much as the next person, because I was like, oh my God, that's the Kaaba, I want to like take a picture because the first time I'm seeing it, I want to like record when I'm walking, you know, doing my tawaf, whatever. I'm just as bad as the next person, right? But I just made that decision of like, be in this moment. It's not for everybody else. It's literally just you and Allah. And really prioritize that, because I think it's so easy now, specifically with everything with social media, to get caught up in having to share every single thing. And that sometimes also includes, you know, like those really deep, intimate, spiritual moments between you and Allah. And I don't know, again, these are just my thoughts, my opinions. You don't have to agree with me. Again, if you are the kind of person who records that and posts it, I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong. It's just an observation. And if you can take something from it, absolutely great. If you can't, just leave it. It's, you know, we're not obliged to do everything the same way. But yeah, so I'm okay, moving on. All right, so I've got like 3 little things that I also want to share, and I don't want to delve too much into this, but I feel like it's important also just to kind of share these things. These are not the most positive things that I'm going to share now. So if you don't want to hear anything like negative, or if it's going to trigger you in any way, you can stop listening now. But the first thing is and again, it really kind of speaks into my first point of like, go when you're ready, because you will be distracted there. There are so many distractions. One, in the sheer amount of people that are there, the volume of people. One second, let me just take a sip of my tea. I'm still recovering a little bit from my COVID. So it's hanging on. I got really, really sick. Very much probably because of all the people. Speaking of which, there's so many people, millions of people, and you're constantly in like a herd of people that you're never alone. Physically, you're never alone. And then if it's not the people, it is, looking around, something like going into Masjid Nabawi. You are in awe. Subhanallah, the place is insane, like in all the right ways, It is so beautiful. And when you've only seen that on TV or in pictures or social media, and then being there, the sheer size of the place, seeing it on TV just doesn't do it any justice. It feels smaller on TV, and then when you're there, you recognize just the volume of people, the volume of space, the size of those huge sun blocking and rain blocking umbrellas they have. It's a lot, and it can also work a bit as a distraction. There's a lot of shops, a lot of food, and everybody's calling you in. There's the cats, all the cats that I was walking around feeding there. You will be distracted. Everyone will want your attention. Everything will want your attention, and so your intention has to be somewhat clear. And you have to remind yourself of your intention so you don't get carried away with everything else. Because one thing that this dunya will do is place dunya into holy stuff, and that's the next thing, like I'll say, like especially for me in Mecca, not so much in Medina, but there was definitely elements of it also in Medina. But I was quite surprised and shocked, and honestly quite I want to say the word disgusted, but like I don't know if that sounds too harsh, but it is kind of disgusted at how unholy the most holy place in the world felt, especially in Mecca. The amount of high-rises, hotels, McDonald's, Starbucks, astaghfirullah. And it feels, again, even just saying, I had this conversation with my dad and even saying it to him, I felt like such a bad person for saying it, but I didn't want to be there. Now, I was sick and whatever, but probably for the best, because I don't know how I would have felt being for a long time in Mecca in that way, and you can't be inside the haram all the time, you do have to go out and rest and all these things, because also in the haram it's packed with people, so it would be quite overwhelming and overstimulating to be there all the time. But the amount of dunya that is literally smothering the Kaaba, it felt disgusting. And it speaks into the distractions and the, I don't even know, capitalist, is that the one? I don't know. I don't remember any of the words, but like that whole like over consuming and money talks kind of world that we live in, and how the Kaaba, like it is such a magnificent place. And trust, I cried like a baby when I saw it, right? I couldn't hold it in. I really but maybe that's for another conversation, but it almost drowns in that sea of consumerism, because it was shops everywhere, hotels everywhere, food everywhere. It wasn't even like people live here. Nobody lived there. These were all buildings made to make more money. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm super and overly sensitive to it, and that's fine, but I was really quite disgusted seeing that, and it did play it did have an effect on me, energetically speaking. Anything outside of the haram there, I wasn't a fan of. And yeah, I'm not going to dwell too much for now on this, because I'm sure that this episode's really long already. But it also speaks into my last and final thought of people. I've said it before and I will continuously saying, just because you're Muslim doesn't mean you're a good person. And that really taught me again of like how it's not the ummah that is going to face Allah on Judgment Day. It is the individual. And I'm so grateful for that. Like, I'm by no means a perfect person. Trust and believe I have so many sins behind me, probably many in front of me still, because none of us are perfect. But still, if we were to face Allah on Yawm al-Qiyamah as the ummah, like, just stop it. Just roll out the red carpet to hell now. Like, well, let's not even try. I'm so sorry if that sounds so negative and pessimistic, but that's really how I feel, because such a holy place was so full of the most rude, the most nasty, the most disgusting. Like, people are just spitting in front of you and stuff as you're walking, like literally in front of you and stuff. Like, I'm just okay. I'm not gonna dwell on that. You get the picture. People are very rude, very pushy. It's just overwhelming in the most horrible way that you could imagine. And I think the reason why I'm sharing it is not because I just want to talk crap about people, but because I had this idea already going in, because as my mum's been there, my sister's been, my brother's been, I know a lot of people who've been, and everybody says the same things, like people are kind of nasty there and whatever, like kind of rude, and you're not going for the people. You really need to like shut the people out, otherwise they're going to ruin your experience. So I knew this going in, and I had a lot of concern around this because I am very sensitive to people around me. Again, I'm an introvert. And so I was already worried about this, and then seeing it with my own eyes, I kept saying like, oh, it can't be that bad. I'm sure it can't be that bad. It is that bad. And then, add a little sprinkling of a little bit more bad on top. It can be that bad, and it was that bad. Not everybody's that bad, but you really have to carry yourself there with so much adab so you don't ruin your experience for yourself. So when somebody is like pushing into you, don't push back, just be nice, smile, keep your patience. Allah will reward you for it. But it is a struggle. And there are definitely times when you're going to be like, enough. Don't go there. Don't fall for it. Keep your adab, keep your integrity, keep focused on why you're there, because other people might otherwise push you out of the whole journey in quite uncomfortable ways. But yeah, so those are just like my first few thoughts around Umrah. I know this episode was a little bit all over the place. It very much would probably signify how I feel in my mind right now and in my soul when I'm trying to put words on it, because a lot of it, as I said, I'm still trying to understand and I'm still trying to get clarity on. But on top of that, some of it is also just like indescribable. They're feelings that we don't have in this dunya because they're probably linked to akhirah or Allah specifically. And so for that reason, I don't have the vocabulary to put words on it. It's very much things that you feel and you know it when you feel it, kind of thing. So I'm sorry if this episode was all over the place, but I still hope that there were little nuggets, little things here and there from what I've shared today that you can take with you, think about, maybe take away from it if you're going on Umrah soon or in the future, I just hope there was something beneficial for you in this episode, even if it was all over the place. So anyway, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I know I've been gone for a couple of weeks, but again, I've explained why now. I hope you understand. Back again to posting twice a week, Monday and Thursday. So inshallah, I will see you in Thursday's episode. But until then, my darling friend, please don't forget to live in love.